So when we gather together here on Sunday mornings, one of the things that we do is we receive Holy Communion. Each one of us has an opportunity to come up to the Lord's table up there and to receive bread and wine. And on the surface, at the appearance level, it's not all that impressive, is it? There's a little bread there. Not maybe the best bread in the world. I'm sure that we could get better bread. Little wafer. We use port wine here. Definitely not the best vintage of wine that one can get. But does anyone know why, by the way, churches use port wine? Because it lasts. You can save it for like 3 months. That's the secret. And I suppose it's a better option than Welch's grape juice, right? We can all agree on that. Sorry, my Methodist friends. So we have this little wafer, this port wine. And as I said, it's not all that impressive to look at. Maybe not all that great on the surface. And yet, what is happening here every Sunday is profound, and it's transformative. What is happening here on Sunday is that you are receiving a sacrament, which the prayer book defines as an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. An outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. The outward and visible sign is the wafer and the fortified wine. But what's really important is the spiritual grace that you receive in that communion. Now you might say, well, I don't know about all that, preacher. When I do communion, for me, it's just a remembrance. It's just a memorial. That's remembering things that happened way back in the past. And, you're talking about spiritual grace, but I can't reach out and touch that, right? It's not concrete. It's not tangible. Where's this spiritual grace in Holy Communion? I think sometimes when we think about religious things, we tend to get overly obsessed with the concrete and the tangible, and we can lose sight of the spiritual and of what is most important. And the truth of the matter is that you and I live by the power of the invisible all the time in our daily lives. This is my favorite example of this. You know what this thing is? I think every one of you has one of these in your pocket, right? Well, when I look at this, what I see is some plastic, some glass, lots of little pieces. But this amazing device, right now, as I've got it turned on, is emitting radio waves that you cannot see with your eyes. In fact, we can only imagine how many radio waves are bouncing around this room right now if we could only perceive it. We didn't even know that radio waves existed until the 19th century. And now our whole lives, in many ways, are built on this. Doesn't look all that impressive, and yet this is a revolutionary device. This has transformative power. Communion also has transformative power. When you receive that little wafer and that fortified wine, you are receiving nothing less than the true bread of life, Jesus himself, the real presence of Christ given to you. You are being united once again with Christ to receive the benefits of that union. Forgiveness of sins, the gift of eternal, unending, resurrected life. You are receiving the gift of reunion and reconciliation with God and with one another. All Christians entered through baptism into the church, right? We heard there was one faith, one Lord, one baptism. And every time you and I take communion together, we strengthen our bond with one another. So we've got that great hymn, one bread, one body, right? We're brought together through the spiritual grace of Holy Communion. And when we gather together at the Lord's table, we get, in a sense, a foretaste of the heavenly banquet that we will experience at the end of history. All of that is happening when we gather together here on Sunday morning and eat that little wafer and drink that fortified tawny port wine. Pretty incredible. An outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. So you may sometimes get into the habit of coming to church, and it becomes your routine, and you forget, really, how significant our actions are here. It's easy to lose sight of that. But our gospel reading this morning is an invitation to remember that there is more going on here than meets the eye. There is transforming power at the Lord's table. And all who hunger and all who thirst for true life, true renewal, for true transformation of the soul will find it here as you receive the bread of life. What we are doing here is profound and deeply meaningful. Amen.